Okay, so let's talk about dimensions in terms of geometry. And the best way to think about it is video games. If you ever played a classic Super Mario Brothers game, the game is in two dimensions because you can move forwards, you can move backwards, you can jump up, and then obviously fall back down again. The first dimension is forwards and backwards, and the second dimension is up and down. That's two dimensions. Now, a later Super Mario game like Mario 64, you can move forwards, you can move backwards, you can move to the right, you can move to the left, and you can also jump up and fall back down again. This gives you three dimensions. If you think about yourself in the world that you live in, we perceive these three dimensions because these are the directions that we can move. And we use this in geometry because we can measure these with points, lines, and planes. A point is this. Now, probably you've graphed before, a couple points, connect the dots, make a line, all that. Here's some points, plot them on a graph. Points don't have any dimensions. You may think that, oh, it's this, or I can make a bigger point like this. We do this so that we can actually see the points, but points don't have any dimensions. So this right here, this is 0 dimensions. So points have 0 dimensions. Now lines, imagine you take this point, so there's a point, and now you take this point and you drag it out. Now you have a line. So by adding one dimension to a line, to a point, you now have a line because this point has dragged out this up and down dimension. Now, what if you take a line, just like this, have a line, and you drag it in the other dimension? So now I have this up and down dimension. What if I drag it out to the side? Now, instead of having one dimension, I have two dimensions. And this looks like a rectangle, but we call this a plane. And you may be familiar with a two-dimensional graph. This is a plane. It's a flat surface where we can have points and lines and all sorts of two-dimensional objects. So, recapping, points have 0 dimensions, lines have 1 dimension, planes have 2 dimensions. We usually think about this as an x and a y axis. Now, how do we label these? This is the important part. So, in geometry, points get called with capital letters. So, this is point A. A line is really a connection of 2 points. So if I have point C and point D, at the end of this line, I'm going to call this line CD. And that's how we label lines. Now, if I have a point B in between here, I still call this line CD because lines only get called by the endpoints, not any point in between. And then finally, we have planes. Not really too important. You don't really see this too much in a geometry class, but typically we call planes by fancy letters. So here's, like a fancy B. There's a cursive D. Again, capital letters we prefer for planes, and we just make it a little bit fancier of a font than we do with points so we don't confuse the two.